independent statehood a dozen years ago, but has yet to make a lasting peace with neighboring Serbia. And right now, Kosovo is experiencing a major political shift. My guest, the country's acting president, Vjosa Osmani, is a young post-war politician challenging the old guard of the Kosovar independence struggle. She promises clean government, a fresh start, but can she deliver? President Vjosa Osmani in Pristina, Kosovo. Welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. A pleasure to be talking to you.
It is a pleasure to have you on the show. I've just described you as a member of a new generation of Kosovan politicians. In what way, would you say, are you different from the old guard?
In plenty of ways, in fact, and although I've been part of politics for quite some time, I started really young when I was only 17, so it's been more than 20 years. I was never part of the executive, so never had any executive powers on the decisions that were made in the country. But I think it is, first of all, because of the political platform on which we jointly ran together with the incoming Prime Minister, Mr. Kurti, which is based on our anti-corruption platform, as well as because our clear vision for the country, which aims at showing our country's full potential, which is based on the potential that our youth represents. There are many other reasons, but it's practically based also on the consistency that we've shown in politics for the past 2 decades, which have convinced the people of Kosovo to give us the overwhelming support that they did. So these past elections that were held on the 14th of February truly represent a turning point in our history. It was in fact the very first time that a political platform, a political option won 50%, which was unheard of but also unexpected for plenty of people in our political and constitutional system. But at the same time, it shows that a new political generation, not in terms of age, but in terms of mindset, will finally give an opportunity for the people of Kosovo to find their perspective within our country and not to look at ways at how to get out of here. We truly believe that our country does have this potential, especially because we have the youngest population in Europe. And we are absolutely determined to offer this perspective by, first of all, fighting crime and corruption, which has plagued our country for way too long.
Interesting you put the focus on the young population. It seems to me the young in Kosovo, and you referred to the fact that many of them go abroad trying to find work, the young in Kosovo for a long time have been angry and alienated. Why do you believe that the promise, the dream of independence, which was, of course, declared back in 2008, why has it turned so sour for so many in your country?
Well, independence was not just a dream, it's the current reality, and Kosovo is here to stay. We will remain sovereign and independent. But obviously the expectations of the people in terms of jobs and justice were much higher than what was delivered. So their expectations were failed in many aspects. As I said, one of the main problems in our country was crime and corruption, which we aim to stop through concrete action in the future government. But at the same time, I believe that it's been about the example that is set by the leadership of this country. So one, we will be leading by example to show, as we've shown in the past 20 years, that we're uncorruptible, but at the same time by showing that we have absolutely no compromise with those that get corrupted. In this way, we will be bringing meritocracy first to the institutions of Kosovo, and secondly by focusing on two main areas, which is education and jobs for the youth based on meritocracy.
But, Madam President, why would young Kosovans believe you? Because, let's face it, you, as you say, despite your youth, you've been around a long time. I think I'm right in saying you were Chief of Staff to the President more than 10 years ago. So you're an insider. You're not actually an outsider. You have made compromises throughout your career.
But only have made compromises that were in the interest of the country and the interest of the people, never the opposite. And the people of Kosovo know that, which is why they have overwhelmingly put their trust on myself and Mr. Kurti in our joint list. So as I clearly pointed out, I've never had any executive role in the decision-making in the past 2 decades. When I was around, I was mostly in an advising role, and secondly, in the 5 mandates that I won consecutively in the parliament, I've been an opposition to the actions that were not in the interest of the people. So yes, being in politics doesn't necessarily mean that you had a role on the decisions that were made and were not in the interest of the people. It has actually prepared me well for the challenges that lie ahead, because I was around when the preparations for the Declaration of Independence were made at that time as Chief of Staff to the President. And that was an excellent, not just an excellent decision, it was the clear will of the people of Kosovo.
Right.
I was around when we were fighting for recognitions and memberships into international organizations. We were successful in that, and these were decisions in the interest of the people of Kosovo.
But
that doesn't mean that I should simply close
yeah.
my eyes in front of decisions that were wrong, and which we aim to right in the next couple of years.
Right, and now you're presenting this as a very clear choice between the old guard who are corrupt and the new generation, such as yourself, who are clean, absolutely clean. I get the proposition you're putting forward, but isn't it much more complicated than that, in the sense that the people you are now implying were deeply corrupt are the people who many Kosovans for years regarded as the heroes of, quote unquote, the liberation struggle. What you appear to be saying now, when you talk about endemic corruption and state capture, you appear to be saying that all of those people, for so long regarded as heroes, were actually crooks.
No, that's not the kind of language that I used. In fact, I don't speak in terms of absolutism, quite the opposite. I think every politician in Kosovo has their right decisions or wrong decisions throughout their career. What I'm trying to say is that there were plenty of wrong decisions in the past. I did not use the term crooks, but there were quite a lot of wrong decisions that took the country in the wrong path. And which made the youth of Kosovo lose hope in a perspective for the country. So for that reason, the country needed a fresh start, which we are offering. Obviously, the term state capture has not been used by us in Kosovo for the first time. It was used by the European Union in their enlargement strategy. And obviously, if we want to fix the problems in this country, we need to state them, we need to recognize them, and then we need to deal clearly with fighting crime and corruption in this country. But this has nothing to do with what plenty of these people did during the war. Yes, like most of the people of Kosovo, the people of Kosovo participated in the war to protect ourselves from the Serbian oppression. So we were protecting our homes, we were protecting our houses, we were protecting our families, we were protecting our country and our right to freedom and independence, because it was fundamentally a fight for freedom and independence. What I'm saying about the post-war period, especially after 2008, when Kosovo declared independence, has nothing to do with the contribution that many of these leaders gave to liberate Kosovo.
Okay,
so I would absolutely not link the two or not confuse the two. I'm only talking about certain people as politicians post-independence.
Well, I find your clear distinction between the activities of senior people in your country during the war and then their activities after the war, the clear distinction you make, I understand it and it's interesting, but let me then pursue what some of them did during the war. As you know much better than me, your predecessor as president, Hashim Thaçi, is now in The Hague facing very serious charges of war crimes, along with a number of other senior figures from the so-called KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army. Do you support that process, and do you want to see justice done in that case in The Hague, not in Kosovo, but in The Hague?
Justice will not be done unless Serbia delivers justice for the Serb criminals that committed crimes, atrocities, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide against the people of Kosovo. And this is a truth that no one can deny, because it happened in front of the eyes of all of the world. The entire world saw the crimes and the wars that were waged by Serbia. So justice will be done only when Serbia repents, asks for forgiveness, and makes sure that those who committed those crimes actually are in front of justice. Let me mention that Serbia is today led by one of the former ministers of Milosevic, and unfortunately they are still in a state of denial. Kosovo is doing the opposite. Kosovo has decided through a constitutional amendment and an overwhelming majority in its parliament to establish the specialist chambers with headquarters at The Hague, precisely because we have nothing to hide, precisely because we believe in justice, and precisely because we want justice for all the victims.
Right.
And we are not afraid of the truth. I'm neither a judge nor a prosecutor,
no.
and I cannot determine what will be the final outcome
of
any trial anywhere in the world. But what I can say is that Kosovo has shown its great responsibility towards the international community, but first of all, in front of its people, by showing that we are ready to deliver justice if crimes have been committed. But there can be no moral equivalency between what Serbia did through a state-sponsored apparatus, and not just in Kosovo, but also in Bosnia, Croatia, and elsewhere, and what certain individuals might have done after the war.
Madam President, let Serbs speak for themselves, and we do have Serbian representatives on this program, and we try to hold them to account, just as now we've got you on the program and we want to discuss with you accountability in Kosovo. You are president of Kosovo. It's in all likelihood going to be confirmed that you're going to have a 5-year term in the next few weeks. So the question for you is simple. If Hashim Thaçi is found guilty of these very serious crimes, would you support him being locked up for a very long time?
First of all, I have to speak for the crimes that were committed by Serbia, because they were committed against the people that I represent.
No, that's not the question.
So
I just asked you.
I'll get to that. But in order to understand my answer, I need to speak about what actually happened in Kosovo. I'm speaking about the families of the victims. I speak on their behalf, on behalf of all the families of the victims. And that's why it's not just my political duty, but also my moral duty to ask for justice. If we, as the Republic of Kosovo, have shown our willingness to establish the specialist chambers, if the political leaders of Kosovo, who are now at The Hague, have shown their willingness to answer to justice, no matter what, then, of course, we have not just the right, but also the responsibility, and not just us as Kosovars, but we expect also the rest of the world to fight for justice, to call for justice, because the obligation to speak up for justice for the victims of genocide is an obligation for all, not just ours. It's an obligation in the United States, it's an obligation in the United Kingdom, it's an obligation in the European Union, it's an obligation to speak up for the families of all of those victims. And as I said, I cannot talk hypothetically about what the final decision will be.
Of course you can't. And we know that Mr. Thaçi denies the charges, but they are very serious charges, and it's a simple question. If he's found guilty, would you support him being locked up for a very long time, or would you, as president, seek to pardon him?
It's, as you know, international law does not allow for pardoning for the kind of crimes that you're talking about. But the answer is very simple. The Kosovo parliament has answered this a long time ago, back in 2014 and 2015, when we acknowledged the jurisdiction of the specialist chambers. We didn't say we're going to accept part of it, but all of it, because we believe in international justice, but also we believe in the truth. And for us, there's only one simple truth, because it happened in front of your eyes as well, and that was that Serbia has committed war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And we were the victims of those crimes.
The European Union says quite clearly that for Kosovo to be on a path to integration with the EU in the long term, there has to be not just continued dialogue, but ultimately there has to be peace between Kosovo and Serbia. Now, your ally, the Prime Minister Albin Kurti, has said that continuing the dialogue and seeking peace, long-term peace with Serbia, isn't anything like one of his top priorities. He's made it sound like, frankly, he's not interested in continuing the dialogue with Serbia. Do you think that's a mistake?
He never said that he's not interested to continue the dialogue with Serbia. But the people of Kosovo trusted us on a platform that is based on jobs and justice. And these are going to be the top two priorities for both of us and for the people that will be working with us and the majority that we have in the parliament. That does not mean in any way that we will not be focusing on the dialogue as well as one of the priorities. And of course, as president of the country, as leader of foreign policy, I will make sure that in this process, we are not just present, but at the same time, we represent Kosovo's interest in the best way possible. Kosovo has extended its hand of cooperation to Serbia, despite of the fact that they have never asked for forgiveness for the crimes that they've committed. But as I said at the beginning, not that we are only interested for peace, we have worked for peace. We have earned peace in this part of the world by paying a very high price for that peace and for our freedom. But justice, like anywhere in the world, is a precondition for peace. So when we sit down on that table, we will be saying the things that I'm saying right now when answering to your questions, that we ask for justice for all of the victims, that we ask for the whereabouts of the missing persons. There are almost 1,700 people that are unaccounted for, and there are still lots of mass graves in Serbia that need to be opened. And the leadership of Serbia needs to be ready to talk to us and answer, where are our loved ones? That's the answer that we need in that negotiation table.
Let me ask you, if I may, Madam President, a personal question.
Sure.
I know from your own personal history that you and your family were caught up in the war in 98, 99. I believe I'm right in saying that your family came face to face with Serb troops, well-armed Serb troops, who forced you from the house where you were seeking shelter and forced you to flee for your lives. Does that personal history make it very difficult for you to contemplate a lasting peace with Serbia?
In fact, it only increases the responsibility for myself to make sure that it never happens to anyone again. No matter the ethnicity of the people of Kosovo, they are all citizens that I represent. And I want to make sure that the contribution that I leave behind, that the legacy that we leave behind, is one of everlasting peace. And it has to be, of course, through a concrete and sincere engagement of all. But this is, it takes two to tango. We need to make sure that Serbia is also engaged by making sure that they ask for forgiveness and they give us information about the whereabouts of the missing persons. This is how, through justice, through delivered justice, we can move forward. We're not asking for revenge.
Yeah, I just wonder.
Despite of very difficult experiences that every one of us had to go through, because there's no single person, there's no single family in Kosovo that has not gone through hell during the war. And even before the war, 1989, 1999, was an apartheid-like regime in Kosovo. I was not allowed to go to school, and neither were other Albanian students.
Right.
And for that reason, it only has strengthened the determination in us to fight for everlasting peace and to contribute for this peace, not just in our region, but also beyond, to give this great example of cooperation among nations so that what we went through never happens to anyone again.
Right. As you say, in your job as president, you are sort of supervising and overseeing Kosovo's foreign policy, and you have said that relationships with friends and allies in the EU and the United States are crucial, in your view, to establishing Kosovo as a stable, prosperous nation in Europe.
Absolutely.
How disappointed are you that all of these years after your declaration of independence in 2008, 5 EU member states still refuse to recognize your independent statehood. Cyprus, Greece, Romania, Slovakia, Spain, they simply don't recognize you as a sovereign nation. And the EU as a whole has not delivered on promises, for example, to establish a system to allow Kosovans easy travel in and out of the European Union. How disappointed are you with the EU?
There's quite a great deal of frustration about the lack of visa liberalization for Kosovo because the EU has not delivered yet on that promise, despite of the fact that we have not just fulfilled all the criteria, but we have also fulfilled double the amount of criteria compared to any other country in the region. But we should not be caught up among disappointment, but we should be working hard to convince those countries that still might have doubts as to whether the criteria have been fully fulfilled, despite of the fact that the European Commission has consistently said that we did, and so did the European Parliament. We will sit down and work with individual countries and convince them once again that actually we're a very responsible country, and in us they will find a reliable partner when it comes to taking our obligations seriously. When it comes to the 5 EU non-recognizers, we will try to melt the ice that has been built between us and the countries that you've mentioned, because there's absolutely no reason for them not to recognize us. There's no similarity between the independence of Kosovo and the territories with which these countries might have problems, and this has been recognized by the International Court of Justice. For that reason, it will require quite a lot of hard work, but we will not give up in our efforts to strengthen Kosovo's statehood. So we will sit down and talk to all of these countries, and eventually, I am absolutely sure that they will recognize our right to live free and independent, at the same time be an exporter of stability in the region and beyond.
Final question. Then, Madam President, because I'm very struck with your words there about independent statehood. It just seems odd to me that as you approach your presidency, you're working with an ally, Mr. Kurti, who, after his big parliamentary victory the other day, was asked about his long-term vision for Kosovo. He was asked whether, in the end, he would support a referendum in your country on merging, unifying with Albania. And he said that, yes, with the right constitutional changes, he would vote to unify Albania and Kosovo. So it seems, if you're his ally and you're his partner, that you're on a path not to long-term independent statehood, but to union with Albania. Is that where you want to go?
In fact, we have both been very clear that we are in a partnership, a political partnership, which aims at strengthening the state of Kosovo, the independent state of Kosovo. And I have been very clear, not just in these past interviews, but throughout my political career, that I feel very strong about the independent and sovereign Kosovo. I strongly believe in it, and for that reason will continue to work for that. Mr. Kurti and I have both also clearly answered questions about the current constitutional context of Kosovo. And
so if I may, because we are out of time, but if I may, Madam President, if there is to be in the future a referendum for Kosovan people on whether to unify with Albania, how would you vote?
That's not a question that I would answer, because according to our constitution, there can be no referendum on that issue. The constitution is clear, and that's a constitution that I really believe in. If that constitution were ever to be changed, although the provisions to change it are extremely difficult because they also ask for 2/3 of minority communities, only if that constitution were ever to be changed, and that might be, I'm not sure, in a couple of decades, in that political context, would I be able to answer that? In the current political context, of course, and truly believing, fundamentally believing in Kosovo's freedom and independence, my answer is Kosovo is here to stay. Kosovo is forever.
President Vosja Osmani, we have to end there, but thank you very much for joining me from Pristina.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.